Hello, welcome to this next tutorial. So last week I did like a Nordic kind of house, and I did that in conjunction with some other people who have made some other Nordic houses, and here we have a whole bunch of them. So I just wanted to go through what I do to then texture them to keep them all consistent, so that I don't have one looking in one kind of style and one looking in another, and so everything matches up. So as I said, I've got a bunch here, and I'll just launch Substance Painter. Where is it? It's there. Okay, so let's go File and New, and I'll work in 2048. Pick your normal map format and then select, and somewhere around here I've got all these little houses. So what shall I pick? Well, I'll just pick one at random. Let's have 4. So yes, everything's fine. It's not a UV tile workflow, so I'll just click OK. That'll come in. There we go. Okay, so there's a ground plane on this which I need to remove, but I'm going to leave it on for the minute, just because, well, it's kind of nice to have it in there. But under normal circumstances I wouldn't have a ground plane at all, because you can't match up, can't match those up between the houses. Okay, so I have a whole bunch of zones here, but in general I have sort of logs, I've got some planks, I've got some other bits and bobs. So what I want is to create a material for these logs and then use it across the rest of this model, and then also use it on all the other models. So let me just select the front wall and go into isolation mode. There we go, and we can start to build it. Before I do that, I do need to bake my maps, of course, so I'm going to bake my maps, and I'm going to use my normal defaults except for curvature, where I'm going to use untick rather relative to bounding box, and then apply to all. Now this is going to give me a more consistent curvature map. When it's relative to bounding box, it's checking the angle relative to the box around the model, essentially. Turning it off means it's more consistent to the actual model. So let's bake those, and that will take a moment or two because there's quite a lot of textures to bake. Okay, so now that that's baked, I'm actually going to undo a little bit of that just to demonstrate the bounding box thing for the curvature. So I'm just going to select that one, and then I'm going to deselect all of my maps and just bake the curvature for this particular one. So if I click bake wall, front wall here with relative to bounding box on, let's move this out of the way. So you'll see this is all quite consistent at the minute. It's all kind of very similar. But if I bake the front wall now, there we go, it looks exactly the same, which makes me look like a fibber. Is that because, I'm not looking at the actual map, am I? Silly man. So this is the curvature map for the relative to bounding box version, and as you can see, it's kind of light down here. It's kind of as I'd almost expect it, but up here it's a bit grayer, a bit darker, and that's not going to spread my images nicely or my textures nicely when I use the curvature map, which I do a lot. So let's rebake that one quickly. So let's go to curvature and remove relative to bounding box. Let's go over here, and now if I bake select, no, not bake selected, just break the front wall again, we'll see what it comes up with. There we go, and now I have a much more consistent and much more even curvature map. So when I use the curvature map, it's going to be consistent. It's not going to be anything weird going on. So that's what I've been using, or what I've turned off relative to bounding box in this particular instance. Okay, so in the next one we'll start to build up an actual material for this, and this material we'll use, you know, for everything that's a log essentially. So I will talk to you then. Okay, let's switch back to material mode, and let's go, there we go. Right, so in the layers we're going to delete this one and we're going to add a group, and I'm going to call this group, I don't know, Norse log or Norse logs. Now I'm going to turn caps lock off and do it again. I don't know how I hit that button so much without knowing. Okay, so in this we're going to create, you know, all the layers that we need to make this right. So let me just minimize that, which you can't see, and then in here I'm going to type in wood, and I've got this wood rough. Now I'm not entirely sure whether this comes default with Substance or whether it's in the Substance source, you know, store, but you should be able to find it somewhere. So I'm just going to drag and drop that onto there. There we go. So, you know, as a starting point, that's not too bad. You know, the knots are quite nice. It's got a few bits and bobs on it, a few you know, nice grain and lines and all that sort of stuff, but it's not quite right. I need to just adjust some of these things down here. So I want it lighter, so let's just bring that up. There we go. And I want to take some of the kind of vibrance out of it, or the saturation rather, to make it rather pale. There we go. Somewhere around there, I think. Not that pale. There we go. Okay, so very first thing is, you know, I want to add some dirt to this. So what I'm going to do is duplicate this layer and then give this one a black mask. So I'm going to add a black mask, and then I'll right click and add a generator. And for this generator I'm just going to use the edgeware. It says metal edgeware, but that's okay. Now I can't really see where that's going, so I'm going to turn the underlying one off, and currently it's not doing that much at all. So what we can do is increase our wear level so that it extends out. That's quite nice. And we can also change our grunge amounts and scale. I'm going to bring the scale down and perhaps the grunge amount a little bit down. There we go, somewhere around there. It's not much of a change, but a change nonetheless. I can turn off the ambient occlusion masking, or I can increase it. I'm just going to take it down somewhere around there, and I can even adjust how much of the curvature map is influencing it. I'm going to leave it at 1 because, you know, it seems like a sensible kind of number. Now even if I change this now, don't change it, just, you know, turn this one off, I'm not actually going to see any difference. So what I need to do is change this one of the top layer. So what I want to do is I want to reduce the roughness, because that will make that particular part a little shinier, and under the colour I want to further make this pale. So I'm going to take that right away from the normal. So I'm assuming this is kind of the new wood, and I can take some of the saturation out, or I could increase it. Increasing it seems pointless, so let's take it down a little bit, and now we've got kind of a dry pale wood, which is quite nice. I quite like it. One thing I can do is, because I will be doubling up on some normals here, I could simply turn off the height channel on the top layer. It depends upon what you want, really. As I'm turning it off and on, I actually quite like it on. Looks like it's kind of affecting these edges a little bit, but other than that, I quite like it, so I'm going to leave it on for this one. Okay, so we could stop there, or we can continue, and You know, I don't want to do anything here that involves brush strokes, because if I do that, that will transfer to all of my other log areas, and I don't want that to happen. I want them all to be procedural. So what I'm going to do is duplicate this layer again. So duplicate, let's take that above there, and for this one we're going to add another black mask and another generator, but this time I want to darken or dirty up the bottom of these logs going upwards. So this generator, I'm going to use a mask editor, and then we'll slide down to position, and I'll turn the position gradient right up. Again, I'm going to need to turn off these layers so I can see what's going on, and at the moment it's not quite right. It's partly because there's curvature involved, so I'll turn that off, and it's also partly because the gradient is kind of the wrong way. Most of it's at the top at the minute, I want it at the bottom. So I'll invert the position gradient, and that will bring it down to the bottom, and then I can increase my balance and contrast, or adjust my balance and contrast to get the kind of look I'm after. Let me increase that. There we go. If I take the contrast down and up, there we go. So if I take it right up, you'll see it's just like a half and half thing. I want to just adjust it down from there to get a you know, a soft transition upwards. Now, because this is just kind of going upwards, I want to break that up a bit. So for that, I'm going to come down to this texture edit area. I'm going to go and find a texture. So if I have a look for a grunge, I want something that's kind of vertical, directional if you like. So let's see what I can find. This one looks good. So I'll drag and drop that on there. Nothing will happen yet because I need to come back up to the texture influence and increase the opacity. And now you can see that that's cutting into that to, you know, break it up. I can adjust it a little bit if I want with scale and contrast and brightness, etc., but I'm not going to. The only thing I will change is actually I'm going to turn triplanar on so that it's a straight projection forward rather than trying to, you know, wrap it around each UV, which will split it up and break it up and do all sorts of things. Okay, so once again, if I just turn these back on again, I won't see any difference, or hardly any difference at all. So I'm just going to go to this one, and again I'm going to take the roughness down. I want this to be kind of shiny and wet if you like, and then I'm going to darken it up. There we go, and the magic starts to happen. Okay, so that's my basic log texture really, and I'm a little concerned about this line going down here. I'm not sure what's going on there. There's also a repeat there. I think there might be an issue on the UV. So let me go and have a look at that. 2D. Okay. Whoops. Just press F to focus that in. Yeah, and I deeply suspect I've got some overlapping zones here. So I need to fix that. But you know, it's something that happens commonly when you're dealing with somebody else's models. You know, sometimes your own. You know, you get the UVs and they're not quite right. So what I'm going to do next is just show you how I'd repair those UVs. Okay, so I will talk to you then. Okay, so as it turns out, it's not a UV issue at all. It's simply a texturing issue. So somewhere in my little texture stack here, something has gone wrong. You know, I've got something that's not quite right. So if I turn that off, the top one, the dark wood at the bottom, you see I get this here, and that's part of the mask editor then. So if I look at what I've got here, so in my textures, if I turn this down, I can see that that fades. So it's something in this texture image that is repeating and not doing me any good. So we can do a few things about that. For example, if I come down to the image inputs, I've got lots of different options to here. So I can click a random seed and I'll get a different look, and depending upon what I'm doing will depend upon how that comes out. Now a lot of them are still coming up in the same place, which still makes me really suspicious of a duplicate UV stacked on top of each other, but it really isn't, because I've checked. But then some of these iterations don't. We can also do some messing around with contrast. I can change the tiling amount. I don't really want to tile it at all. I can rotate it a little bit till get to something a little bit more as you might want it. I could even invert it and get another look out of it, but I think that looks okay. There are of course the original texture options. So up here where we have triplanar, for example, I believe that issue came when I turned triplanar on. So you can turn triplanar off and you'll get another kind of effect. So yes, it's not always UVs, even though I usually blame them first. Sometimes it's your texture stack. Just something in there is not quite working as it should do. Okay, so since we don't have to kind of redo all that, redo any UVs or anything, what we can actually do is start to use this elsewhere. So I'm going to turn my isolate off, and then I'm going to instance this to the other log areas within this particular scene. So if I right click and instantiate, I can select none, and then I want to select my walls. So I've got my left wall, right wall, we've got front wall, that's the source, we've got back wall, and I think that should be about it. So once I do that, you'll see that just then textures all of my other walls using exactly the same stack. And because I've instantiated them, any change I make under my front wall will immediately show up in the other ones. So I could turn that layer off, for example, and that will turn it off for all the layers. I could change the colours. I can do all sorts of things to make it just work as I want it to. So rather than texturing all four walls separately, I've textured one wall and then copied it to the other ones, but not just copied, I've instantiated, which means that all of them are linked, and if I change the original, the others will change also. So that's all well and good, but that won't let me use that for other models. What I need to do for that is right click on these logs on this folder at the top and create a smart material. So once I do that, it will create a smart material of the name that I've named this folder. So I've called it Norse logs. So I'm going to prefix everything with Norse here so I can find it ever so easily. So for example, let me go back into that mode for now. I'm just going to go through each of my, I don't want that ground one, I want that's what I was after. So these logs, I can simply now drag and drop that into there, and it does it. It's not linked to the other one, so I can update it and change it, but it's as simple as that essentially. Let's go back to the other view. Now I can do what I need to do. Okay, so let me just save this. So let's go File, Save, and I'll just save it in my default directory. I'll call it Norse 1. And when we come back, I'm just going to load in a new model and apply those logs to that. See how it looks. Oh, it's still saving. Okay, so I will talk to you then. Okay, so we've created our smart material, which we're going to use to texture the logs on some other models. So let me go File, New, and open up one of these other models. I can't remember what that one was now, or even what the other ones are. So that's that one. So I want that one. Let me go to Item Mode. Let's pick this one. This is number 10. Okay. So back to Painter, and we'll have number 10. Click OK. I'm going to discard this one because I already saved it. There we go. And I'm going to bake my maps. So texture set settings, bake my mesh maps. Going to go and make sure my curvature is not relative to bounding box, and then we'll bake those. Let's apply that to all. There we go. I'll speed it up now. Okay, so that's all baked nicely, and now I just need to go and find what I want to do. So let's have wall 1. There we go. So we've got wall 1, and all I need to do now is in my layers, I'll get rid of that one, and I can just drag my Norse logs onto it, and it should look pretty good. That doesn't seem to have done the job. It's possibly because I'm not on wall 1. Excellent. So let's drag and drop that there. There we go. So now we get essentially the same effect because it's been UV mapped consistently. All of the pieces are going the same way in each model. The smart maps are driving the customization and the mix between, and everything is good. Even the door looks good, even though I managed to put it on there by accident. Okay, so we can then instantiate this across texture sets. Let's select none, and I want it across all my walls and probably the roof support as well. There we go. Click OK, and then I'll come out of isolation. I've deselected everything, that's why. I don't know why I did that. Oops, there we go. So now it's there and everything's good, and we can carry on and do our next bit. So that's just a bit of a test really to see whether the smart material is consistent and will work, and it is, and it does, and we can carry on and make our next one, which will probably be some planks or something along those lines. So I shall talk to you in the next section. Okay, so next then we'll do some planks for the roof, and for that let's go and find the material first. It's not that one, that should have something on it already. Oh, right roof, left roof, etc, etc. And I'm actually going to start out with the Norse logs because clearly the wood in this region is of that kind of type, but what I will need to do, let's change this to plank because we'll save that later. This I believe is probably doing next to nothing because it's not suitable for this particular area, and I want to change the colours, so I'm just going to darken this up a little bit. There we go, and that gives me a nice kind of, you know, dirty, rougher kind of view. And then let's close that, and I'm going to turn the roughness up on that one, and then the wood rough for underneath, I'm going to darken that as well. There we go, somewhere around there I think. But I'm going to leave that at the same kind of shininess, because, you know, it's where it's worn away, and, you know, it's a little bit shinier underneath. Okay, so I also want to put a dirt across all of it. So I'm going to duplicate my bottom layer and just drag it above the light layer there, and then we'll add a black mask, and to that black mask we'll add a generator, and then let's try dripping. That might be interesting. It's not. So let's go dirt. I'm going to disable the bottom layer so I can see what's going on. You see it's coming into the ambient around that chimney, which is quite nice, because, you know, dirt will collect around there as the, you know, things fall down and, you know, go up against it. It's perhaps not, it's perhaps too much, but, you know, we can adjust that down. The grunge scale I'm going to take down a little bit, but I'm going to increase the amount. There we go. Now for this, because, you know, this is the kind of dirt layer, and I'm imagining it being ever so slightly greenish, you know, where moss has grown and, you know, got into nooks and crannies, we'll go to the layer, and then I'm going to pick the colour and add a kind of a dark greenish to it, greenish yellow. There we go. Let's turn on our other layers, and that's what we get. That looks a bit overwhelming, really, for the other, you know, for the fact that there's nothing of that on the logs, and that's probably my mistake. But let's take that off, and then we'll adjust our dirt layer just to bring it down and make it a bit more subtle. There we go. Okay, so that's a pretty good base for roof planks. So we can save this as a smart material, and actually I'm going to instantiate that to the other roof level, which is roof left, I imagine, or left roof. There we go, let it think about it, and there we are. Okay, so I mean, that is essentially the basics of it. You know, you create your material, you make a smart material from it, and then you apply it. The next stage is to actually go in and add personal detail, which one I'm not too worried about the green, because, you know, I'm going to paint some of that green into the other areas, but that's not something I can then make a smart material of, because it's UV dependent, and, you know, that causes then that issue. What I will do, because if I don't I'll probably lose it, I'm just going to go into this colour palette, and I'm going to add it as a swatch so that I can pick that exact green for the painting. So I mean, that's essentially it for, you know, the material, or the material side of things. In between videos or in between sets, I'll probably make some stone, which I'll use in other areas, but when I come back to do the next little set, it will be detailing. So I will talk to you then.